All right, welcome back to the final day, everybody, of chapter 20. So we will finish off section 4 today. Should be relatively short. Few slides to talk about, a little bit extra, but for the most part, pretty short. And you will have a little three-section quiz at the end. So, section 4, the environmental movement was born as the mood of protest in the 1960s energized movements to preserve the environment and to ensure the safety of consumer products. So today we're going to talk about the environmental movement as well as consumer product issues. So we're going to start with the environmental movement. Marine biologist Rachel Carson's novel Silent Spring will create a nationwide outcry by criticizing the use of chemical pesticides, especially DDT. Um, and so national concern will result in a ban on DDT and stricter controls on other chemicals. People will become more conscious about the quality of air and water and the threat of ground pollution. And finally, in 1964, President Johnson will add the environment to his Great Society program. So, because of Rachel Carson and many other biologists and environmentalists, you're going to see a huge push for stricter guidelines on what's being put into chemicals that are being sprayed on foods and different things. And DDT was a bad one because it would affect fish. So, it would get in the water, fish would ingest this water and it would be stored in their fat in the fish. So when eagles and other birds of prey ate these fish, um, they were finding that the eggshells would become brittle. And so when a bird would go to sit on their eggs like they usually do, the eggs would crack. And that's when you're going to see a drastic decrease in the number of birds of prey. Um, and also, the whole Silent Spring thing, if you ever notice in spring, as it starts warming up, you start hearing all these frogs and all these birds and things like this. Um, well, that just kind of was starting to stop happening. And so that's why she started doing all this research and found all these things. So the environmental movement will be very, very crucial. And another thing would be by the 1960s, concern about the exhaustion of oil and gas and the pollution caused by fossil fuels will lead to the development of nuclear power plants. But concerns will grow over two issues with these power plants. Number one, the concern of environmentalists was the effect that discharged water from nuclear plants had on raising water temperatures and the ecosystems that could be threatened. So, this discharged water was used to cool the reactor core. Now, the water isn't radioactive or anything like that, but it's really warm. And fish and other marine wildlife need to live in certain environments. And those are all controlled by temperature, different things like this. That's why those of you that fish around here and go walleye fishing, you'll notice right now over by the bay and closer to Bay City, you're going to do pretty well catching walleye. Then, as the summer goes on, you'll notice they get to Caseville, around Port Austin, Grindstone, and eventually, towards the end of the year, as the water gets even warmer in the big lake, but not the bayside anymore, they'll start working their way towards Harbor Beach. So that's why you will see fish migrate in different patterns. And so that's being affected by this discharge water. And the number two concern was a possible nuclear plant accidents that would release dangerous radiation. So there will be one that takes place in the United States. It's called 3 Mile Island. We'll talk about that one. But more famously is Chernobyl, which will happen in the 1980s. And Chernobyl had a complete reactor meltdown and explosion. And so that's why basically you can't go anywhere near that place anymore. So 3 Mile Island is located just outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. 3 Mile Island is this little tip of the island right here. You see right here it says 3 Mile Island Nuclear Power Plant. It's located right at that dot. Okay, Harrisburg is a fairly large city. Okay, here's a picture of 3 Mile Island. Nuclear power plants are very, very commonly identified because you can see these conical shapes of these cooling towers. So that's allowing water vapor to dissipate and cool off the nuclear reactors. Now, there is one located over by the city of Detroit by the airport. When you guys fly out of Detroit Metro Airport, you should be able to see those, and they would be located to the east. And so here's a little sign located outside 3 Mile Island now. And it's kind of a placard to just kind of dedicate what happened. So it says nuclear accident at 3 Mile Island on March 28th, 1979, and for several days thereafter, as a result of technical malfunctions and human error, 3 Mile Island's Unit 2 nuclear generating station was the scene of the nation's worst chemical nuclear accident. Radiation was released, a part of the nuclear core was damaged, and thousands of residents evacuated the area. Events here would cause basic changes throughout the world's nuclear history. So because of this accident and Chernobyl, you're going to see a lot of changes to the nuclear system and things like that. So Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, don't know, look at it right here, this little epicenter right here, that is 3 Mile Island. Okay, everything in these rings around it, well, these rings all represent the fallout area. So if you're in these first couple rings, well, you're pretty much not going to be doing great. And then you start getting out here and you're just going to be exposed more or less to radiation poisoning. So, but if you look, you got New York, Atlantic City, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Charlottesville, Richmond, Virginia. These are Pittsburgh. These are huge, huge cities with a lot of people living in them that would have been exposed to all this radiation should it have had a complete meltdown. So the federal government responds by creating the NRC, or Nuclear Regulatory Commission, to oversee the operation and safety of nuclear power plants. The group supporting conservation and environmental awareness will support the establishment of Earth Day on April 22nd every year as well. So Earth Day every year, April 22nd, is now always going to be Earth Day. That's also thanks to the environmentalists. So this whole NRC that comes about because of 3 Mile Island. Earth Day comes about. It originally was founded in 1970, and it was meant to kind of as a day to recognize things that we need to do to make the Earth a better place and try to clean it up. So the government also began to increase protection of our resources and the environment as well. So 1970, the EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency, was created to set and enforce national pollution control standards and act as a watchdog against polluters and combined all existing agencies concerned with the air and water pollution under one place. So the EPA is going to be kind of the government branch managing basically pollution. The Clean Air Act of 1970 will put control pollution caused by industries and car emissions. So the Clean Air Act basically says your car emissions can only have like X amount of carbon dioxide, things like that in them. And the Clean Water Act of 1972 regulates the discharge of industrial and municipal wastewater. In other words, we can't take our sewage and dump it into the creek. Well, A, that's gross, and B, it is extremely frowned upon now by the government because of the Clean Water Act. But the federal government will face a difficult task in balancing demands of business development and environmental protection. So the problem is with the more you regulate businesses and the more protection you put on the environment, the harder it is for businesses to actually make money because they got to spend money to meet all these standards. Um, so the nation will continue to debate exploration and development of oil fields in Alaska since the oil pipeline was first built in 1974. Alaska has a huge, huge oil reserve. Problem is, it's located in the middle of a national park that we would ultimately destroy to get to the oil. And so the project created jobs and money, but also increased concern over welfare of the Alaskan wilderness and the rights of Native Americans. We talked about that a little bit yesterday with this. And so, because of this issue, in 1971, the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act will set aside land for Native groups for conservation purposes. In 1978 and 1980, land claims were increased under this act as well. So, this is where you see tribes in Alaska actually getting some of their land back and it actually increasing. And the reason they're doing this is because they know the tribes won't sell these lands because they're sacred to them, and it will stay in a conservation set aside, basically, and not be able to use for minerals. And the consumer movement grew out of the 1960s protest in an effort to look out for public welfare. Now we're going to move to the consumer movement. And this would be led by one man really more than anybody else, and that man is Ralph Nader. He led the fight to protect us, and he targeted the dangers of American car companies. So Nader was a lawyer, very, very smart man, even ran for president several times. Um, And so he is going to go after the car companies and the safety issues with cars. And due to his efforts, Congress passed the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act in 1966 to force the automobile companies to protect consumers from unsafe products. And so, if you ever heard of the Corvair, it used to be nicknamed the Coffin on Wheels because it very easily rolled over and or exploded due to the location of its gas tank. So yeah, probably not a good thing. Um, and so he would also expand his efforts by investigating the meatpacking industry once again, baby food, insecticides, and push through the passage of the Wholesale Meat Act of 1967. And so that will be a really good thing. And Nader kind of brings about a revival of the progressive movement. Um, and so Led by Nader's raiders, which were scores of young volunteers who turned out reports on products and manufacturers that put consumers at risk, Americans would begin to demand that their government act to protect their common good. So, once again, due to all these reports put out by these volunteers and Ralph Nader, um, and because of Nader's efforts, you're going to see the American people demanding that the government institute safety laws and regulations in order to protect them from these manufacturers. Because they're looking at basically making a profit or, well, maybe losing money because now they got to follow along with these guidelines. So this is the end of chapter 20. Please do the little lesson check. The description is posted, or the link is posted in the description of this video. Sorry. Friday, so tomorrow, May 8th, you will not have any homework. Well, most of you won't have homework. Others that are missing assignments, you need to get those done. I'm giving you tomorrow to basically use as your work day to try to get caught up on everything. So if you have any questions, please email me.